Hey,
Happy wine.
it's not
No.
Wednesday,
Yeah.
but we're live. Again.
2 nights in a row,
Cheers.
Mira Boucher. Good evening, Canadian wine lovers, Carl's Wine Club members, everyone across the country. Good evening. 8 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock here in Pacific. It is a special night. We've got 2 nights in a row tasting Painted Rock wines with Canadian wine lovers. How much of a privilege is that, Mira? It is absolutely
Amazing.
Incredible. So, we have a fun night tonight in front of us. The next hour or the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to have the owner of Painted Rock Winery, John Skinner, with us. We're going to discuss about the journey of Painted Rock on the Scaha Bench here in British Columbia. So, a lot of excitement out there. I know here in our household, that's for sure, because we have 7 bottles of Painted Rock open, so it's a party every day.
Absolutely. And we've got some crazy stories just in this last week of things that have happened with those wines and how they keep surprising us every day.
Every single day is a new surprise. Jeez, eh?
Amazing. Yeah.
Okay, I have the best one of all that happened today because Mira, now.
So Carl has this habit sometimes that kind of drives me crazy because especially with some of the best bottles of wine that we open, he likes to put the cork on, but like not actually push it in, just put it on top. So it kind of looks like the cork is put back on, but it isn't. And then we go to bed and the next day we're like, oh my God, the cork wasn't on.
Yeah. So the red icon.
Most of the time the wine is dead because of that, because it's been open now like 16 hours, right? Well, you did that last night with the red icon that had already been open for a week.
No. So red icon has been open since Saturday, not the last Saturday, but the previous one. Okay. So now we're on 12 days. Okay. So, and we had, I would say probably, I would say like a quarter of an inch in the bottom of the bottle after the live last night, because Mira sipped on red icon last night during our live, and was still fantastic. So just Mira, like Mira said, I put the cork just at the tip of the bottle. And tonight for the interview, I said, Mira, which one of the red icon you want? She said, of course, red icon. So I'm like, I took the cork. I'm like, oh no, I forgot to put the cork on. Guess what? That quarter of inch of wine is still today, after 12 days, in the last 16 hours, wide open, it's still rocking. This wine is an absolute tank. It's a tank. I can't believe it. And when we say every day open, every day you have a bottle.
That's what's in my glass, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what's in my glass, right?
Yeah, 12 days later and 16-hour wide open. Like, come on. When we said that thing that every day you have a bottle open, it's like a year or two of aging. But now we're at 25 years of aging with the red icon. So if you had any worry about if these bottles are going to last, I can tell you this is the quintessential age-worthy wine that we have here this week. So it's really, really, really exciting. I couldn't believe it. I thought like that was
crazy.
That I was the dagger in the little bit of red icon we had. There was the dagger. No, still rocking. So we have a spectacular spectacular lineup of wine to review again tonight. We did it last night with our, it was a great attendance on our Wine Wednesday last night. It was absolutely fantastic. But we're going to do it again tonight. But tonight we're going to do it a very different way because we have John Skinner who's going to join us. We're going to talk about the very beginning of Painted Rock. And we're going to talk about the growth. We're going to talk about the award, like the multiple, the countless amount of international award and national award that they had throughout the years. We're going to talk about miracle is not the right thing, but we're going to talk about how this year, after the disaster of last year, how Painted Rock have survived this crazy frost. And so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk
By
about
disaster, we mean like we recently had the harvest report in BC, and they're reporting what 60-70% of wineries' vines have been decimated.
Yes.
And so we want to learn about how
but
things
what
went.
I'm really interested about, like the whole conversation, I want to know and dig deeper into the beginning of Painted Rock, because that site is unique. Sorry about that. That site is unique. That site is special. So we're gonna do. And you know what? I love talking to you, Mira, but we went through that so many times. So how about we bring John with us?
Yes, absolutely. Let's bring
How
John
about
Skinner,
that?
owner and founder of Painted Rock. John, it's so nice to have you on with us.
I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. And audience, yeah, I got to tell you, the energy and really, Carl and Mira are doing a remarkable thing in Canadian wine. I just love their energy, their knowledge. I'm honored to be here tonight.
John, thank you. We are blessed to have you. We're excited to have you because you know what? the story, the journey of Painted Rock needs to be known to everybody, because you won a lot of award across the world and lots of recognition. But what I wanted our member to hear the story, that how everything started, because the key. Sorry about that. Oh, okay. The key of a great winery it's one start, and the start is the site, the winery site, and where you are on this Caja bench. It's something unique. It's something beautiful. It's breathtaking. But I would love for you to tell us the journey, because it was not easy to find that site, and it took you a long time. So take us back on when you started to look for a winery site in the Okanagan.
Absolutely. Do you know, it was in the late 90s that I used to go down to Napa Valley every year to Ray Signorello's winery, which is fabulous. It's on Silverado Trail. And I watched him build it, and the lengths to which they went. They had international consultants. They really aimed highly, and it was really over delivering on its promise. And I thought, okay, when I retired from my previous career in the late 90s, I remember discussing with my wife. She knew I needed something to do, so I thought maybe the Okanagan was showing some really good progress, and I know Jim Wise, and I watched what he was doing at Burning Owl, and I watched what they were doing at Mission Hill. I watched there was progress happening, and at the time that when we got in, I think when I started looking, there were probably around 50 wineries, and it was, I thought, well, I remember telling my wife one day, I said, I'm going to go to the Okanagan and buy a winery this weekend, which is just like so stupid. But I went up and I looked around, and I was talking to realtors, and I was talking to people trying to get an idea. And I realized, okay, I'm not approaching this properly. So I went to a viticulturist and some people, and I asked them, what approach should I take? And I ended up putting together a team. There was a friend of mine from Napa Valley that oversaw some things. There was a lady from Kelowna. There was just a really great team. And I said, this is going to be terroir driven. So first and foremost, we need to find a 10 out of 10, not a 9.5, a 10, because you're limited ultimately you're limited by your terroir. So if there's a frost pocket, or if there's some inconsistency in the soil, if there's some thing that's going to stop you from being the best, that will always, that's going to limit you. So I said, I'm not getting in unless I find a 10 out of 10. Well, like 3 years later, we'd looked at, I think, 34, and we did a ton of due diligence on each and every one that we were looking at. And finally, I remember I came up to the Okanagan one time, and I was on a flight back to Vancouver with Cynthia Enns with Laughingstock. And I said, you know what? I'm giving up. We found some 9.5 out of 10s, but no 10s. I'm not going to do this. And she said, before you give up, I know somebody in Kelowna that you should talk to. Well, I called this gentleman, and I used to be in the brokerage industry, and so did he. And we kind of knew some of the same people and stuff. And we spoke for an hour about what I wanted to do. And my simple goal in this journey was to participate in the improvement of the industry. I'm a proud Canadian, a proud British Columbian, and I wanted to contribute to that. So I said, let's aim highly, let's do this. So I'm sharing this information with this gentleman. And finally he said, okay, you're the guy. And I said, what do you mean? He said, there's a property down in Penticton that I haven't shown to anybody because they're not the right person. It has to be somebody that's got your MO, your plan. I said, okay. So I went up, and lo and behold, there were 800 stumps on the property. It used to be the largest apricot orchard in the British Commonwealth. It was famous for it. But that was the reason the property, nobody would touch it, because it was such a journey. And my guys said, that's a mixed blessing, because what we would suggest that you do is everybody was telling me to bulldoze all the stumps to one end, and then, or you peel the topsoil back, you remove the stump, you repair the alluvial silt layer, you put the topsoil back, you do it 800 times, and you're going to have a property that you're looking for. And it's going to take you a year. So in that year, put a weather station in the middle of the property, put sensors everywhere, and plant every clone of every variety that you're going to do for a reason. And I said, okay, you know what? My philosophy in life is know what you don't know and hire well. and I had a really good team of people overseeing this. Well, when all you people come and visit me at the winery, there's a little bit of our bench at the very bottom on the right, and he used to own the whole thing. It's only about 1.5 acres, but about a few years after we'd planted and we'd won a couple lieutenant governor awards, he gave me a call and he said, John, I always knew that property was going to work out. I'm going to plant my 1.5 acres, and it doesn't look consistent to ours, but it's adjoining it, and it has the same stumps. And I said, okay, Karl-Heinz, if you're going to do it, make sure you don't bulldoze it, but do what we did, remove the stumps. And a few days later, there's a bulldozer there. He bulldozed it. Well, if you come and visit me at the bottom of our Chardonnay block, there's a block of about 1.5 acres there, and those plants are about 3/4 of an inch. They're if we're 20 years old, we planted 19 years ago. His are probably 14 or 15, and his are not an inch, and ours, and a lot of them don't bear fruit, and ours are 5 inches. Like it's just night and day. But that was good advice, and thank God I had these good advisors, and they advised me which clones, I had to bribe a nursery in Bordeaux to get the
That is another question. That is just part of the story that I want to hear. Part of the clones, the clonal selection is a critical part of the story.
Okay. So here's what they do. They spend a year analyzing it, and they've got around the perimeter. It's a little cooler because there's shade behind the big rock face. So that gets Merlot, and then off the lake where the sun's going down and the reflection off the lake, that gets Petit Verdot and Cap Sauve, and it was incredibly intentional. And then at one point, we realized that certain sensors at the north part of our property, we thought there was a problem with the sensors because they were coming in and recording at like 3 to 4 degrees constantly cooler than the immediately adjacent block, which was Cap Sauve. And we couldn't figure out, why is this happening? And then we went over and we looked at it and we realized there's a creek at the north end of our vineyard, and there's a cold breeze that comes from the mountain behind it, and it just influences that one area very specifically. So that planting block is actually, the rows are in a different direction to accommodate the air that comes from the mountain, not the air that comes from the whole amphitheater. It's specifically from the creek. So that got Chardonnay, and it loves it. So it's just,
absolutely.
so I had this very intentional planting strategy, and I had to get all these clones. And I went to the local purveyor of all these, the guy who supplied them all. And he said, oh, if you want these clones, you have to go to the top nursery in Bordeaux. And I said, okay. I said, well, go. And he said, okay. So he said, I'll call you in a week. So a week later, he calls me back and said, okay, I can get you everything you need. And I said, what? I thought it was really hard to get these clones because it's 2 clones of every variety for complexity. And he said, well, I can't get you clone 99 and 100 of Syrah. I can get you these 2 others. They're almost as good. And I can't get you these clones of Cab Sauv. I can get you these ones. They're almost as good. And I said, look, I spent 3.5 years looking for this property, a year prepping it to plant almost as good. You give me the name and the number of that nursery owner. I want to talk to him. And he was very reticent. So I kept calling him every day for about a week. And then finally, he gave up and he said, okay, I'll give you his name, but just take care of me. So I gave this guy a call. And I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, no, I can't, because there's a pecking order. The first growths get first pick, the second get second pick, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, export market. And I said, well, if we bought like 60,000 plants, I said, what if I pay $1 a plant more? And he said, okay. So I got everything we wanted. And do you know the most interesting, I don't know if it's that we got those clones, that's the best thing that ever happened to us. But when we hung up, or when we hung up on the call, he picked the phone up and he called Alain Sucre. Alain was the consultant who worked for the Merlot family, who were working with Vincor, and he made the first several vintages of Asuis Larose. So his friend in Bordeaux at the nursery phones him and said, Alain, remember this place Okanagan you used to go to? And I said, yeah. And he said, you should go back. This guy's blowing his brains out. And Alain, for 20 years, honestly, he's been a godsend. He is so knowledgeable. He is incredibly, he doesn't tell people what, he teaches my team constantly. So Gabe and Barry and my team, they've all had a 20 or, well, Gabe's been there like 17 years or something. He's a 17-year tutorial with one of the smartest guys in the business. And same as Barry. And they all have enormous respect for one another. So it's not like it's just, now it's collaborative. And when we do our blending sessions, Gabe's been doing it for so long with me. I'm just the loudmouth in the middle of it. it's really Gabe and Alain, but they're looking for these nuances and things. And Alain will taste something and he'll say, okay, there's a slight flaw. What is it? And it's so fun to see this stuff happen. And he'll say, okay. I remember one time years ago, I said, okay, there's a harshness in the finish. He said, John, where is it? Like at the beginning, 30% of the way through, 50, 70, 90. And I said, I would say probably 40%. And he said, okay, because there's a different remedy if it's 40 than if it's 80. So like, it's just amazing. But now when we do these things, we've been doing it for so long. We'll all look at one another and say, okay, there's a little flaw with this one. What are we going to do? And it's not, the flaw, identifying it. It's what's the cure. And I remember one time we used a few drops of Arabic gum to remove this, and it was perfect. And I thought, it's organic. It just worked, and it just settled this thing down. And then the next year, we're blending again, and Alain said, so you notice any of all the components? He said, do you notice anything? And I said, well, in that, I can't remember where I was, in the Cab Sauv, there's a slight harshness about 70% the way through. I'm learning. And he said, what's the cure? And I said, well, would it be a little bit of Arabic gum? And he said, no. It was 2% Merlot. Boom, it was perfect. It was unbelievable. It was he just knows what to do. So this journey has been remarkably satisfying working with him, and the respect level is just enormous. And I lot. You know, for me to be able to put on a dinner in London and Jancis Robinson was there and she hadn't heard of Alain Sutra. And at the end of the dinner, she looked at me and said, "Where did you find this guy?" Like, she wrote a really nice article in the Financial Times in London and spoke very highly of him. Alain is a genius, and the Okanagan Valley is incredibly fortunate to have him working with us.
Well, I mean, that's the whole potential. I mean, when people show up here, I believe that's when we realize that, like, these really talented international guys, they show up here and they see it right away. They're like, "Oh my God, I want to be here. I want to have my stamp on that success," because but we're well, your friend, the late Stephen Spurrier mentioned it as well. You guys don't have a clue, right?
Oh.
That was, you famously said it. We don't have a clue. We're sitting on the golden mine, and people,
Thank you for bringing up Stephen, and huge thanks to my dear friend Mark Nadeau. Mark has been probably as instrumental in the advancement of Canadian wine on the international market as any single person. Honestly,
do you know that Mark and I and Mira have been in touch since you introduced us last summer before the Pan Canadian?
Yeah.
We've been in contact almost every month, and now we're putting a special tasting together for early next year at l'Académie du Vin. That this is all you, John Skinner. This is all you. That connection is just strengthening every month.
It is that thing. It's connecting these dots, because Mark was Stephen Spurrier's partner in Académie du Vin. And Mark would put on these events at 6-7 Pall Mall in London. When we'd put on our event at Canada House, we'd put on a subsequent event at 6-7 Pall Mall, and it would be Mark. And he worked with me, and we picked a smaller number of. We didn't want it to compete with the Canada House event, but so if we had 34 wineries in Canada House, we'd have 8 at 6-7 Pall Mall. So it'd be like 3 from Ontario, 3 from BC, and Nova Scotia. 1 or 2, and we just wanted it to be, that was a member tasting. But who was at that? Mark Nadeau and Stephen Spurrier. And Stephen he's just the most generous soul. I got to spend a lot of time with him. Thank you, Mark. And he was always really helpful with guidance and strategic, advice. It was really, really good. And then our group, I worked with a group of wineries, the Okanagan Wine Initiative, and we were a group of 9 wineries that were doing a lot of international stuff. We haven't done anything since COVID, and it's just because we got busy with other things. But we hosted Stephen. It was supposed to be Stephen and Jancis, but Jancis couldn't make it. But in October of 2020, just before COVID, Stephen came out for 4 days, and he toured our valley. He toured the 9 wineries. And I put on the last night, we had a really nice dinner at Painted Rock, and there's 14 people there. And he stood up at the end and he said, I feel like the Okanagan is my second big discovery. There's nothing that was just so kind and generous. He put California on the map. so
he sure did. He sure did.
The 76 tasting in Paris, he did that. And for him to say that he thought the Okanagan was his second big discovery, I just hold Stephen in the highest esteem, and my friend Mark Nadeau, for connecting us, because Mark is the most selfless guy. He is still doing that for Canadian wine. And I honestly, we've got the best connected champion on the planet working with us.
Absolutely. I want to get back to the site a little bit, just for a few seconds, just to give our people a little sense of the size. So how many acres of vines are planted on the site?
It's just under 27 net acres planted. We've got a 56 acre or 55 acre.
So the site's in total 55, 56 acre, and 20. So like just around half of it is planted with vines.
It is. And it's all about, like, we could be planting bits and pieces elsewhere and stuff, but we just wanted to plant the absolute best and aim at the absolute highest prize. And it's over delivered on its promise completely. Like everything about it. Well, it gets to this harvest in, we so harvested. We go through cycles like this. Like we'll do 109 tons down to 72. So we were in the lower range this year, but hallelujah, we were just fine. And the quality of the fruit is spectacular. So the whole idea of the journey is 100% estate. We don't commingle anything with anyone. We've never bought fruit. We've never sold fruit. Another thing, and I don't know that I've ever shared this with you, but one of the things that Alain told me at the very beginning, he said, I've never worked with a winery from the very beginning. So I'm going to give you some pretty aggressive advice right now. And I said, what's that? He said, the biggest problem in the wine industry is hygiene. And the way that hygienic flaws are shared is through oak. So John, I never want, because your winery building is brand new and you've never had oak in there yet, said, I want you to buy 100% new oak in your first vintage. It's like 150 barrels. There's a lot of money. And
that's a pretty steep investment to start and when you start a winery. I mean, this is not cheap.
No, wait. Then he said, so what we're going to do in year one, we're going to buy 100% Sega Moreau. He said, that's kind of the elder statesman. And I'm going to rate every barrel with each clone out of 5. So it's going to be 3.75 with one clone, 4.2 with another. He rated all these. In year 2, we're going to sell all those. Find a friend that wants a good deal on some really good oak. Tony Holler, you get him. He's a really good friend of mine, Poplar Grove. So in year 2, you're going to buy 50% Sega Moreau and 50% Sorry. And we're going to compare. And I'm going to rate them both. So, and then we're with each clone. And then in year 3, I think it was Demtos. So we had 100% new every year. And that cost a fortune. But after year 3, he looked at me and he said, you've done 25 years worth of Cooper due diligence in 3 years. You will never, now we will go from 100% new to 90, 80, 70. Now we're at 35 to 40.
Now you're going to refine the program. After you design the program, you're going to refine the program.
Completely. And now the journey for us is the pursuit of elegance. We knew that we produced big wines that could handle the oak, but now it's just really imparting the most elegant inflection of its influence. But have we ever had any issue with any of the hygienic things? None whatsoever. We're absolutely impervious to this stuff. I actually had a neighbor of mine one time come over after year 1 when those barrels were going out to Poplar Grove and the new ones were coming in. He said, oh, what are you doing? And I said, well, this is what Alain told me to do. And he said, oh, I could have saved you $250,000 or whatever it was. I said, what do you mean? He said, all you do is you put a barrel stave in that 1-year-old barrel and it reinvigorates it. I said, I'm just going to trust Alain. Look, his brand is connected to us, and I'm just going to do what he wants. And a while later, I had Gerard Bertrand came, and
I had a chance to have lunch with him maybe like 10 years ago in the south of France.
Do you know what? I didn't even know who he was. He called me one day, and he said, I've been hearing a lot about Painted Rock. This is just really early in the journey. And we'd won some awards. And he said, I'm leaving tomorrow around noon. But can I come by early in the morning tomorrow and see what it's all about? And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to meet you. I'd be happy to have anybody come and see us. Like, I was so excited. I Googled him once we hung up, and I realized, oh my goodness, he's Order of the British Empire. Like, he is as respected as anybody in the business.
Absolutely.
And he came. And the next day we go into our barrel room, and I get the thief and I put some Merlot, it's the 08 vintage or whatever, in his glass. And he said, this is extraordinary. I can't believe this is your second vintage. And thank God you don't do what the guy up the road does. And I said, what's that? He said, he puts staves in his barrels. And I said, did he tell you that? And he said, no. You can taste it because only one of the 4 sides is toasted and the other sides aren't. And he said, it's just so obvious.
Oh my God. Hey?
So all these years later, I'm at Canada House in London, and who comes in? It was like the first one that we did, first or second, And Gerard Bertrand came in, and he was one of the first guys. He points to me and he says, "My favorite guy in the business, the guy who cuts no corners." I said, "Oh my
Oh
God,
my God,
I
that's
should have been
awesome.
the guy who cut corners." If I just, but I told Jancis that story a few years ago at the end of our dinner that we had for the theme of the dinner was Okanagan wineries that work with Land Sutra. And I told Jancis, who was sitting beside me, that story, and she welled up. And I said, Jancis, I'm sorry that I was so. And she said, John, he was my best friend. And I wrote his obituary in the Financial Times in London. I've read it. Oh my God, I didn't realize they were so close, but I was very proud of
Yeah.
his influence. And Jancis has been fabulously. She's the toughest person in the industry, but everything it's so incredibly constructive because she never wrote anything about us. I remember at that dinner, she said, I'm going to write something about you because it's been 10 years now. It took 10 years of going to London and getting the wines in front of her for her to write something. She wrote a beautiful article in the Financial Times. But these are the things that, it can't be assumed, it has to be earned. And that's
Yeah.
always been my philosophy is that earn it, don't assume it. And
No,
in the wine
absolutely.
industry, don't sell it, pour it. Don't sell it, pour it. It's a really important thing internationally.
So, okay, so that's the international. I want to know, because you won a lot of international awards. To you, at the winery or for the family, which one is one of the most important of your award that you see that you cherish and you keep close to your heart?
Well, that's really important. I gotta say, a decanter wine of the year in 2020 with the Red Icon 2017.
Yeah.
Because when I got into the industry, I didn't and when I was one of the organizers of the Okanagan Wine Initiative, when we started the initiative, here was the mandate. It was, when we go internationally, we go as the Okanagan. You don't go as your brand. Okay, let's build Canada, British Columbia, Okanagan, and let's be selfless. Let them peel the onion and figure out who Painted Rock, Poplar Grove, any of the participants are. Let them figure that out, because we've had Martin's Lane and Checkmate and some fabulous wineries in with this group. And you know what? We build, I'm in on a lot of lists throughout Europe in places like Frankfurt, but the lists have Burgundy, Bordeaux, all these pages and pages, and then an others page.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want an others page. I wanted a page of Okanagan.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been getting there, but the decanter, when that came out, I got a call from Eric Asimov, Isaac's son, Eric Asimov, the New York Times, and he said, I'm reading it. So we get on radars that way. So I've sent the wines that hasn't been reviewed. They haven't been reviewed by me yet, but these are the things. It's not about competing with your neighbors. It's about competing with your neighbors to win business against Washington State and Napa Valley. And I've realized, since I've been going to Europe so much, I used to think, okay, we're head to head. I didn't know what made us stand out. Do you know what makes us stand out? Do you know why Okanagan fruit is so? I didn't realize it. It's warm days and cool nights creates the acidity. I did a tasting at the Chapon Fin in Bordeaux with a fabulous chef sommelier. They had 5 sommeliers here. And I went through the first 4 reds, and he tasted them and he said, these wines are extraordinary. I'm going to take them all. My heart stopped. I said, this is like the #1 restaurant in Bordeaux. And I said, there's one red you haven't tried yet. And he said, what's that? And I said, it's my Cabernet Franc. He said, I've got to stop you there. I work with 4 other sommeliers, and we have an agreement that we will only buy Cabernet Franc from 4 regions. And it was Loire Valley, and he named them all. I think they're all French. Anyway, he said, I wouldn't consider tasting one from California because it doesn't have the bright acidity. And I said, would you just indulge me and give it a try? And he said, okay. So I poured him like a half a glass. I got to close this guy. The bottle's open. I'm flying out in 2 hours. So anyway, I pour it for him, and he lives with it for the longest 5 minutes of my life. Sips it, puts his glass down. He said, we just found our 5th region. And that, to me, was the biggest eye-opening, one of the most important eye-opening moments. That he said, I wouldn't in a million years try a Cabernet Franc from California because they have warm days and warm nights. They ripen fruit, it's big, round, and ripe. Yours is ripe and bright, and it's a different thing. So if we know what makes us better, then go head to head. Like, I'm really happy to be in those markets. I'm not going to move a lot of product, but let that, I love Napa Valley. I love the wines, but if we're different, play to our strengths. But
I mean, and I feel like if I'm listening to Thomas Batchelder here, and I know you and Thomas have traveled together, and that's great to hear that you guys have the same message. It's the maple leaf flag first. Let's represent Canada. And after that, we're going to talk about our brand later on, because first and foremost, we're going to promote what we do in terms of the maple leaf. And I think that, like, as much as they do in Ontario, they have incredible potential out there, and the same thing on our side, but so complementary. And I had a great conversation with Mark Nadeau a couple weeks ago. We're brainstorming on the phone, and I said versus, and I said something like Ontario versus the BC, and he's like, whoa, stop it. And I knew when I said it, I was like, it was completely wrong, because it cannot be versus, it can be. And Mark said, Carl, we're not against each other. I was like, I know, it came out wrong, but that's exactly what it is, right?
You know what? Thomas is a rock star. He's so good for the industry. We have people in Nova Scotia that are fabulous. Play to our strengths, show a broad portfolio, because they do. Ontario is different. Nova Scotia is different. BC is different. So let's go. When we do Canada House in London, it's fabulous. BC's together, Ontario's together, Nova Scotia's together. But just take a walk around the room, and you're going to see like the bubbles out of Nova Scotia. They are fabulous job. And you know, they're equally committed. Ontario, I've worked with Moritas, and you know, there's some really, really good people in their market as well.
I mean,
we're on the same page. It's totally
absolutely. So let's get back to the estate. I mean, we're fortunate because 2023 was a very, very difficult year in many different aspects, right? We had these forests, this wildfire that went on the screen and on TV from around the world. There was the rock slide. They closed the valley. They shut everything down. I mean, there was an extremely challenging time, but also we know that late last year we had that devastating frost where the report comes in, and we're seeing 60% of lost on our grapevine.
That's terrible.
It is terrible. It is absolutely terrible. Some of our iconic producer can barely make wine this year.
Yeah.
And I don't want to rub it in people's face, but the work that you've done 25 years ago have paid off in one of the most critical time in our industry, meaning this last year, where when they told you to dig up these stump instead of bulldoze them, now the result is that you saved your crop, you saved your vineyard this year.
Do you know, I'll tell you something else. There was also a very contentious moment when I had two experts. When we were devising the planting strategy, we knew what we were going to plant, but one wanted to plant north-south and the other wanted to plant east-west. And I came under the vineyard one day and they're arguing. It was quite angry. And I said, okay, the two of you we're going to lunch, and one of you is going to work for me after lunch, because it was just a non-starter. Like, the whole idea of the direction that you're going to plant in, it was just acrimonious as could be. And the gentleman was saying north-south because the sun comes up in the east, goes down in the west. But anyway, Valerie Tate, the lady, said, you know, he just went on and on and on. And then finally Valerie said, okay, I get the north-south, the sun comes up and the east goes down to the west, it's going to affect the fruit equally. But if you plant east-west, you're going to accommodate that air that's going to come from the low row mountains behind you, that's going to go down to the lake, and it's going to be constant. And air movement is more important. You can always change the amount of sun that affects the fruit by doing leaf removal on the north side of the plant, but you need to move that cold air. And because we've got like 6 or 7% grade down to the lake. And and they said, and this is what's going to close the deal, John. And I said, what's that? He said, if you want to do what he wants to do and plant north-south, you're going to have to layer this all, like, you're going to ruin the site. The terroir is going to be all these various different layers all the way down, and you're going to have to bulldoze the hell out of it. And I said, we're planting east-west. Well, when Alain first came and walked the vineyard with me the next year after we just planted, the first time I met him, he didn't even have an appointment with me. He flew from Bordeaux, walked on the vineyard, came up to me and said, "Are you the owner?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, gave me a file with his CV. And he said, "I'm Alain Sutra," gave me a little bit of his background. And we walked and talked for hours after that. And he said, "I came here because I want to help you, because you're aimed at the right prize."
I stop you for a second. How do you react when you look at someone's resume and you say Chateau Petrus on the resume?
And you know what?
Do you ask the guy if he cheated?
No, he's so, honestly, Alain is so humble. He's the last guy to say it. And that's why when Jancis met him, she said, "Why don't I know this guy?" I said, "He's not a self-promoter. He's just very good at what he does. And he's humble and hardworking." I love the guy. And
a little different than Michel Rolland, eh?
Yeah. Well, different guys. It's okay. You know what? Different guys. But anyway, it's so Alain looked at me and he said, "So who decided to plant east-west?" And I told him that story, and he said, "Genius." God, that was my first exam, because I ultimately had to make the decision. And I just thought that when she said that you're going to terrace the property all the way down, and she said, "You wreck the property." And she also said, if you plant north-south and the cold air comes down in the winter, it's going to affect the first row differently than the second row, differently than the third. It's not going to move the air. You need to move this air. And I thank God I listened to her, because it's, now we go there, you go there on a foggy day and you watch the cold air and the fog just go right off the cliff. It's just an amazing thing.
Yeah.
So, and in those very cold days last year, we moved the air.
That's what happened.
Roots were down deep and we moved the air and nothing was stagnant. And that's just very, very fortunate.
So late December, after a big giant crop, 2022 was a bumper crop. No time for the vines to settle down, no time for the vines to go to dormancy. Boom, get hit by the first event. And that's where everything started, right?
It is. And for us, it just made it one of our, and as I said before, we do this in terms of production. So last year we were right at the top, and this year we're down here. And it is what it is, but it's nothing. The plants aren't dead, but the quality of the fruit is fabulous. It is fabulous. So I'll take it any day.
Absolutely.
And for all I know, next year is going to be back up 110 tons again, and away we go. So I'm just, you just have to live with this stuff. And farming, but now, okay, while we talk about farming and we're talking about a disaster, let's talk about the 2021 vintage. I have a question about that, because we're tasting 2021 was extremely challenging in the sense that there was the heat dome, and the heat dome, as a viticulturist or in the wine business, you never had a spike of heat that high that early in the season. So I was walking up and down the valley talking to multiple different farmers, say, how are you going to react to that? And everyone had a different answer. Yeah. So 2021 so we're seeing a little bit more of a higher alcohol wines, and they're different style.
I'm telling you one thing, John. The 2021 Cabernet Sauvignon from Painted Rock is making its way to my top 10 wine of the year. I gave it 94 plus point. It knocked my socks off, John. And I go into that with a little bit of a and knowing that 2021 might have an impact on that. Wow, the freshness. There's a freshness in the mid palate of that capsule, of a little mint eucalyptus. There's a varietal typicity. It's fantastic. What was the secret of the vineyard work in 2021?
Well, that's really interesting because we had a we had a really good canopy, and that's one thing that we've always had. One really nice thing at Painted Rock is we have no turnover. Our staff is really good and really knowledgeable, and they do. So we had a really good canopy. We kept as much on as we could, and across the board, it's fabulous vintage for us. We've managed to dodge a bunch of bullets in this journey. 2020, we had the fire up behind us, but the wind was always going to the east, and there's no smoke taint in our 2020s. We are the luckiest people on the planet because we were at enormous risk, but it didn't affect us. And in 2021, the fire was further down OK Falls, and sadly, it affected some of my peers. But we were just 2021 is just fine. We have that lake effect, which mitigates heat extremes.
Absolutely, a big effect.
So it's there are these things, and also the lake effect, but also the low row of mountains behind us that moves that air. So if we were flat, it wouldn't be the same. It would sit there. But if you have a low row of mountains behind us, when the sun goes down, the heat gets
wipe everything off, and you restart all over again the day after.
Bingo. That's what happens. And you can. I put on winemaker dinners at our place all the time. And about 8:45 in the summer, I would say, "Okay, put a sweater on." People look at me like I'm out of my mind. It's 26 degrees out. And then within 5 minutes, there's a cold wind coming down from the mountain. And there goes the heat. And the plants love it. And I love what it does to the plants. So it's all good.
Okay, one more thing. Okay, I have two more things I want to talk about. Mira, I know that Mira has a few things for you, but we're getting there. 2022 Chardonnay. Okay, John, I mean, you've been grateful enough. You gift me a couple back vintage Chardonnay in the past. I've been tasting your lineup almost every year. I have to say, 2022 Chardonnay, even if you won gold at Wine Line in 2019, I believe that 2022 Chardonnay is your best Chardonnay to date. In my opinion. Well, I think that Chardonnay has a freshness that I haven't find. Like, it's just a fantastic Chardonnay.
Love it. Well, I'll tell you what, there's a little secret here. About 6 or 7 years ago, or maybe 6, 7 or 8 years, something anyway, we always had, beside the tasting room to the south of it, there was about an acre. And I left it vacant in case we wanted to build an inn or something one day. And then one day I turned to a land and I said, you know what, I don't want anybody being here at night. I think this place is so special. I want it just to be quiet. So I think I'd like to plant that acre. And Alain's eyes lit up. And he said, oh, right. And I said, why are you so excited? And I said, if you planted it, what would you plant there? Because it's pretty warm. He said, John, when I first saw your planting strategy, there was one clone in the entire strategy that was missing. And I said, sorry? He said, yeah, I saw that you had clone 99, 100 of Syrah. They worked beautifully together. Then you had these things, like everything was right, but there was one missing. And I said, what is it? He said, well, do you know in Burgundy, all these beautiful Chardonnays, everybody knows that they have clone 548 and 76. I said, yeah. And he said, and that's what you have. I said, yeah. And he said, do you know they don't tell anybody, but they on a warm part of the site, they have clone 95. They don't tell anybody that. And it just increases the complexity. So we planted that about 7 years ago, and it's just really come of age now. And so for the first number of vintages, it didn't. But I'm really, really excited. I did a dinner in London with, I think Jancis was there, and we had the 17 Chardonnay. This is Mark Nadeau put it on again, and it's just, and at the last minute he said, hey John, we always have these Canadian wines beside a top international wine. And he said, we've got your Cabernet Franc with such and such, but we forgot to get a Chardonnay. Would you bring a Chardonnay with some age? And I was at our house in West Vancouver, and I didn't have any. I said, oh, I just got some 17. And he said, yeah, bring that. I brought it. And I never really thought about the cellarability of the Chard, because we only produced 500 cases of it, or 5 or 6. And it wasn't the biggest, I wanted to have an estate white, but I didn't think of it I didn't respect it enough. And now I want to start leaving 50% of it and re-release it in 6 years, because it was fabulous. And it's a different wine. The color was golden. It was aromatic like you wouldn't believe. It was a different wine. If you put that 2022 down for 5 or 6 years, you're going to taste something entirely different.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about that. Yeah. But I really like the whites from 2022. I think there's a definition, the flavors, really, really distinctive. And the brightness, I like the freshness. It was, to me, it really, really hit the right spot. So 93 plus nice. Point. It's probably from 2022, my top BC Chardonnay that I've tasted from the 2022 vintage. So far, absolutely wonderful. Congrats with that. Now, I know that Mira had a fun little story that she wanted to share with you about the Painted Rock and about the logo, because we've noticed that we have some artists in the family as well. Yeah. So our friend Daniel Bonterin came over after we did a very special vertical tasting of his rosé. Yeah. He had 12 years of his rosé.
Wow.
And we tasted them all side by side. Anyway, it was incredible discovery. And Daniel, to celebrate that, brought a magnum of the Red Icon. Which vintage, Mira? I think it's 2009?
Wow.
Yeah, 2009.
2009, and we celebrated to taste that.
Our neighbor was kind enough that while we were tasting the 12 vintages of rosé side by side with about 22 members, right, Carl? Yes. Our neighbor was smoking pork all day on the smoker, making pulled pork. Oh, so goodness. We had your Painted Rock Red Icon with our neighbor's pulled pork. It was phenomenal. And then what's funny is your logo has these artistic renditions of a rock, I assume, right?
Yes.
Right? Alluding to the native pictographs that were found on your property, right? Yep. And then our son, I catch him right after dinner. He's scribbling. He's 7. He's scribbling on the bottle. And I said, "Oh, you're scribbling on the bottle." He said, "Yes, someone had already started scribbling. I'm just continuing."
Yeah, that is my signature. I scribble. I love it. That's so cool.
I didn't start it. It was already partly done.
Yeah. So we're 5 years old. Is changing the Painted Rock's logo slowly. So
you know what? I'm so happy. Honestly, that was a really fun part of the journey. Was I thought naming the property would be a breeze. It wasn't. I thought finding a logo would be a breeze. It wasn't. All these things. But we worked very closely with CF Napa, fabulous branding people down in California. And I sent them a picture of a sculpture that we saw in Paris. And about very shortly afterwards, their artist came back with a rendering of because I said, I don't want you to steal the idea of the sculpture. I want you to think brush strokes and painted rocks. And they came back with that. And I just said, I wanted timeless. I didn't want cute. Cute was happening then. And I didn't want cute. I wanted something that stood the test of time, that in generations from now, you look at it, and that's Painted Rock. And I'm really, really proud of it. And, it's very satisfying.
It's fantastic.
That's amazing.
Well, I know that speaking of older vintages, I think you've got to run to taste an older vintage of your wine. You mentioned that before we started. So we'll let you go, John. I know you've got a belated birthday treat coming your way in the form of your own wine, right?
It's our first vintage. It's the 07 Red Icon. A friend of mine is bringing it over for my 65th birthday yesterday. And a friend of mine's bringing over my first vintage of Red Icon. And I gave bottles to all these friends of mine, and they didn't have logos on them. I just signed them in a gold pen. So scribble. I just scribbled on a gold pen. They're all trying to sell them back to me now.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. That's incredible.
That's
Okay, we'll leave you with one last thing. We mentioned at the start, the Pan-Canadian tasting that we did, tasting 12 wines from coast to coast. It was so much fun. In Niagara, we had about 80 people in the room. And we met your friend Mark Nadeau, who we're now collaborating on, a big reds tasting. But you mentioned a certain menu a number of years back that you had with Steven Spurrier and all this. Is this the menu? Because I see here 2009 Painted Rock, which is the one we had, Carl.
Yeah.
And the 2005 Chateau Cheval Blanc.
It was. That was the one. The 9
That's
beside
incredible.
the Cheval Blanc. And that was the one that's at the end of this was amazing. At the end of the dinner, somebody had said, "So what was your favorite?" And no, the two wines were side by side. You knew which one was which. And somebody from across the table said, "So, Stephen, what are you going to say?" Because we were actually holding our own side by side, and it was people were saying, "Hey, John, this isn't bad." And then Stephen says, "I can't say anything because John will quote me." And he's just so good. And then about 20 minutes later, he stood up and he said, "I've got a quote for John." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "John, your Painted Rock Red Icon is more CB than BC." Isn't he just a gem of a guy?
Wow.
Understated, more Cheval Blanc than BC. That was just such a lovely, measured thing to say. And he's in my heart, honestly. I just love the.
And John, when we talk about vintage, like spectacular vintage, I'm sorry, but your 09 icon was beside one of the most iconic vintage of the Bordeaux history. 05 is the one who changed the price structure forever. After 05, there's not a freaking first growth war for normal people being able to be purchased. 05, I always said 05 fucked up the whole freaking Bordeaux business because
it's amazing that you got that menu, because that was the dinner of all time. Honestly, that was and again, thanks Mark Nadeau. These dinners have been extraordinary, and it's the most fun part of this journey for me. It's really, really cool. Hey, you guys.
Oh, John. We'll let you go to your birthday dinner. Enjoy the 07 and have a ton of fun. And thank you so much for sharing the story. Thanks for sharing your beautiful wines. Thanks to Lauren, who put that in. She's always such a pleasure to work with. And Todd, thanks to all of the team.
I couldn't be more proud of Lauren. She's honestly, she's taken us to a new place, and she's absolutely a rock star.
When we talk about the direct to consumer, I mean, you guys know you're bang on. You guys are leading the way, and it's what you're doing with your brand is absolutely spectacular.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks again. Have a great night.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
That's amazing, hey?
How much fun is that? You pulled that out of your ass, Mira Boucher. That is freaking amazing.
I remembered that Mark Nadeau, like maybe a month ago, shared this menu with us and said, "Can you believe we tasted Chateau Cheval Blanc 2005 with the 2009 Painted Rock?" I think because we talked about this bottle that our kids scribbled on, the 2009. And Clay Martin was just commenting, Clay was there when we tasted it. So
yeah, absolutely. He was there.
So Mark sent this to me. He said, "I'm pretty sure this was the menu I was talking about." And there we go. We mentioned it again tonight. What an epic evening.
Amazing. Wow, you never stop impressing me, Mira Boucher. Thank you so much for bringing that amazing interview like over the top. I mean, it's so always great to talk with John and his passion, and I just love it. And the reflection in the wine of the authenticity of the site, of the professionalism of the team. It makes wine that, I mean, there's not a lot of producer we can pull that off. I mean, these are very, very, very special wines. I mean, plain and simple. The Red Icon 2020 has been open for over 12 days, including 16 hours wide open.
And the only problem with it is that it's gone now, finally.
No, there's no more. You had the last drip, Mira Boucher, okay? I feel the same way with the Chardonnay. I'm done. I can't get any more. So
there was literally this much left of the Chardonnay. And I said to Carl earlier, I was making you guys know that viral lasagna chicken soup on Instagram. Well, I tried it. It's really good. I needed a cup of white wine. I was like, Carl, there's a little left of this Chardonnay. Can I put it in the soup? He's like, no.
Are you crazy?
That's one of my favorite Chardonnays from BC right now. And so he wouldn't let me put it in the soup. He had to taste
no,
it
was a big no Chardonnay for the soup for Mira. So yeah, no, what a great time. I'm grateful. It was awesome. So yeah, let's recap the pack. So until Sunday, you guys, there's not a whole lot of these wines available. So we have the rosé that I rated 91 points, big, bold, but fresh, and the 14.5% alcohol where it doesn't show. This is perfect for Christmas table. This is perfect for the holiday because it can sustain any kind of food. This is so food friendly. This one has been made for the holidays. It's amazing. I loved it a ton. So there's the rosé, there's the Chardonnay that I just mentioned. It's my top 2022 BC Chardonnay of the vintage. Absolutely off the charts, my opinion. It's the top of Painted Rock that has produced so far. Just my opinion. Yeah, that I've tasted, obviously. Chardonnay off the chart, 93 plus point. Also, now moving on reds, the Cap Franc, 92 points, 92 plus points, the top BC Cap Franc of our 54 Cap Franc marathon that we've done a month and a half ago. It was the showstopper, one of the showstopper of the night. That Cap Franc had a lot of attention. Also the Merlot, 92-point Merlot. I mean, there's so much Merlot grown in Valley that when you get to one who's special and one who like has that really varietal typicity, that's what it is. It's the backbone of Painted Rock. This Merlot, it's the base of the red icon most of the time, and that's that. Yeah, this is a classic Merlot. Moving on to the 93 plus point red icon. I mean, this wine will be a 20. Like you put that in your cellar for 20 years, and this wine will always impress you, impress your wine lover friends, impress everybody. So a very special wine. And to me, to my personal opinion, my favorite of the whole lineup, it's the 94 plus points Cabernet Sauvignon. Only 265 cases made. This Cab Sauv, I'd blow my socks off. I'm so sorry. I didn't expect that much. It absolutely blew me away. Absolutely fantastic. Oh, I forgot the Syrah. A big, bold, juicy, inky, built for the long term. 90. I couldn't score it the entire way. I had to put an open score. It's 91 to 93 because this is bold, and
it's very big right now. But I think if you give it a couple years, it's gonna
soft spot. 5 years. That's a soft spot. I was joking with Marcel Morgenstern, our friend at Bellaterre. He bought a pack, and he's like, "Hey, can I open the Syrah when I get it?" I'm like, "You can do whatever you want, but I will give it 5 years." He said, "What? 5 years?" But this is a wine for the cellar, definitely, no doubt about that. And yeah, this is our lineup this week. So last time, almost 2 years ago, that we featured Painted Rock, and here we go. We're back at it, and we are excited. We've been tasting these wines for almost 2 weeks now to see the evolution, and this is absolutely tremendous. When you talk about an iconic winery, legendary wines, you can put all of the adjectives that you want, but these are BC pride. These are BC Okanagan wines at their best. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, there you go. Thumbs up. Painted Rock. Mira Boucher, thank you very much for this extra hour on Thursday night. Thanks to all of our amazing members. If you want to treat, by the way, you can do 3 packs this week. So 3 packs or 6-pack or mix and match. Treat yourself. You're going to get them before Christmas. So get a few bottles of Painted Rock for your holiday.
Amazing.
Canadian wine lovers, Carl's Wine Club members, All of you, I'll see you next time.
Cheers.